Charlemagne.
Why are you talking? I said I'm starting. Now everyone has to hear me say this to you. Hello, we're starting, and reaction had to interrupt us right as we were starting. So welcome to this live stream today. I think the topic's pretty self-explanatory. We won't just be discussing whether or not Trump can still win, but that's sort of guide us at the beginning at least. We're going to be talking about the election, what's going on. I mean, and not only will Trump win, but does it matter if he'll win? Will it even really benefit us at all if he manages to win re-election? All that type of stuff. So yeah, that's the basic outline for tonight's discussion. Trump's sort of a difficult figure because I'm as everyone, as all the regulars at least I'm sure know, I'm pretty pessimistic on modern electoral politics, and I could not possibly ever imagine voting for the Canadian Conservative Party again. They just had a leadership election recently, and the new guy is just as bad as the old guy. They're just in Canada. They're all awful. Even the sort of dissident Conservative Party, the People's Party of Canada, which Maxime Bernier started. I mean, they're better than the Conservative Party, but even they aren't that great. Like their big anti-immigration proposal, which Maxime Bernier refers to as ending mass immigration, is only reducing immigration by about 50%. I think it might be slightly more than that, but that's basically all it is. I mean, that would be really cool. That's better than what any other party in Canada is promising, but that's not really that much. But what does make Trump a bit different is, as much as people like sort of rag on him for not fulfilling a lot of his promises, and he hasn't fulfilled a lot of them, he has actually managed to make some progress on some of this stuff. Banning critical race theory from universities was pretty cool. But even more tangible than that, because whether or not that will have much practical effect is questionable. But what has had quite a bit of practical effect is his reduction of legal immigration. He has reduced legal immigration by just about the same amount that our based Canadian dissident right party wants to reduce it, by about 50%. So that's pretty good, and that's a lot more than what most Western conservative parties have ever managed to do. So I mean, those are sorts of the main reasons why, if I was an American in a swing state, at least, I would probably vote for Trump. But it's still, I feel like I know it in the back of my mind that it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's nice to reduce immigration by a significant amount for a couple of years, but will any of this really affect the long-term trends? And not just on immigration, on all these things, on critical race theory. It always comes, Moldbug quote comes to my mind. That's like going up against the Death Star with a laser pointer. And at the end of the day, none of the stuff that Trump is doing is really going to change that. So does anyone have anywhere to continue from that?
I don't really disagree with your basic premise there. I think it's a pretty good analysis of the situation. I'm not in a swing state. If I was, I probably also would still vote for Trump, despite doing a lot of shilling for the clear pill at this point. I'm really, I think on that side of things, I think Moldbug has kind of like taken a little too much of his own stash, and his sort of outward preference for Biden, I think, is a little absurd to me. So I do think it is. I hesitantly say that it's probably worth having Trump in office for another 4 years. Although I admit that that could potentially backfire just by sort of adding fuel to the fire that is the modern political paradigm. But yeah, that's my basic thoughts on the matter.
One of the things I talk about a lot when I'm trying to get people to stop black pilling or clear pilling or whatever, I don't know, and just stay on the Trump train is like counterfactuals in policy. It's like the first thing Trump did in my mind is he didn't sign the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it's like, that was a huge deal because, at least, and I'm not sure what the status is now with all the other countries, but at first, like, part of the thing was the U.S. had to sign that for that to work for all the other countries. Like, the thing was just a non-starter if the U.S. didn't sign it. And so to me, it's like, okay, yeah, that maybe that won't affect things 100 years from now, but I mean, for now it's nice, and I mean, who knows how bad things could have been now, and then and then sort of project out, into the future 100 years from now with that one change. How bad is that going to make things in the future? I don't know, but it's like, to me, because even if all these executive orders and stuff can just be flipped the other direction, it's like, you're still building some kind of power while things are the way they are, right? So the Trans-Pacific Partnership didn't get signed, so now we've had 4 years of businesses kind of building themselves around this idea that it's not going to be, that we're not going to have it. And so, maybe that has a positive effect for the future. I don't know.
It's funny you should mention that, because, I've been working on a script for a while for the next video about this topic, and I've been having a lot of trouble with it, especially ending it, because I'm really not sure where I stand on this at this point. But the Trans-Pacific Partnership is one of the positives that I bring up in the ending. And, I think people often forget that, Trump did pump out quite a few useful things he promised in his first year in particular. And yeah, in 2017 and 2018, things slowed down a lot, and he didn't get a whole lot of progress done in some areas, especially with Obamacare. That was a major thing that got stalled out. But, I think at this point he's done enough good things that we've kind of lost track of them and forgotten about them. And we shouldn't underestimate the value of things, especially the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And like Sedler mentioned, the immigration reduction, and although a lot of the early footage of like the wall being built was kind of for show, there actually is significant progress on the wall at this point, among other things. So we definitely shouldn't be too black-pilled. And I think, like I said, I'm not in 2016, let's go campaign for Trump mode, but I still want to see him win. I'll probably still vote for him anyway, just for the lulz, honestly, even though he's going to win my state. I feel like it's still worth the token time it takes to be behind this guy just in voting, because I really think, Moldbug talks about Biden, right? But I think it's pretty clear to everyone at this point that Kamala Harris would kind of be the real president. And I'm very afraid of what someone like that would actually try to do in that office. Because one thing we see is Trump isn't very powerful as president, right? But when you have a left-wing president in there like Obama or Harris, who would probably honestly be the president at some point, I would expect Biden to resign. She could really use power like Obama did, because when the executive branch aligns with the rest of the cathedral, it can get a lot of really bad stuff done. And I don't think we're really ready for that. We've spent a lot of time on the right wing, I think, in the last 4 years, sort of wasting our time, making a lot of very silly mistakes that have gotten a lot of people deplatformed. And, we've lost a lot of ground there. And I think we really do still need the time. So, and I think Trump still actually does provide us with a lot of cover, even though, I guess at this point it's almost like we're too far gone. Like, if you just remove Trump from the equation, right, the left isn't just going to settle down instantly. What I see in my everyday life is this: corporations especially are sort of acting out the progressive agenda at 110% at this point, and that's kind of happening independently of who the president is at this point. So, I don't really think I think having Trump in there is at least something for us, and something we should definitely desire, at least for the next 4 years. And I think, although I don't see us finding a way out of our predicament on the large scale through just the normal democratic means, but I think if we can at least show up to the fight on that front, especially at the federal level, for the next couple of decades, even, that's better than completely disengaging. I think, which is kind of what Moldbug's perspective is right now. I'm not there yet. I'm like 90% there with him, but I think he does go a little too far in some places.
We may have gone too far in some places. I really agree with that, and I just want to put an extra addendum on the Kamala Harris question. She is actually quite dangerous. I would agree with Charlemagne, where it's kind of similar to Obama, where Obama had this sleazy kind of radical past where he was a power broker in Chicago. He learned from an Alinskyite mentor in New York, I think. She has a similar backstory of crawling up the reins of power. I forget which local politician it was in California, but she had an affair with him, of course, to jumpstart her political career. How she behaves in the debates and how she's behaved politically, even just in this primary, shows that she's kind of a, cynical. I don't necessarily think she's politically radical, but she's cynical and will definitely do what it takes in the same way someone like Hillary Clinton would do. So I do see that serious problem with someone like Kamala Harris, and I can definitely imagine that she would sooner than later do these policies like the red flag laws, taking away people's guns, doing more of these hate speech laws, pressing down on dissidents. I do think that she's the kind of person that would be willing to go with that. So really, pulling the lever for Trump is more of like, it's not necessarily we're going to reverse this, but we're going to keep this at the speed limit and stave off the radicalism for a couple more years.
So the question I might ask in this situation is, do we feel like the left's agenda has been more advanced or less advanced in the last 6 months? Because I feel like what we're saying is, because Donald Trump's in office, and because I 100% agree his policies are better, like obviously I think he's a superior choice in that arena, but do the small scale policy wins that Trump offers actually counteract what's happening with the left? Because yes, he bans critical race theory. Yes, through an executive order. Yes, he is going to probably appoint a Supreme Court judge. Those are all huge things. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not underplaying the importance of that. But I don't know about you guys, but it feels like the left has had nonstop wins in their agenda for the last 6 to 8 months under Trump. And again, I don't think it's because it's a function of Trump's governing policy in those scenarios, but I think we might be overestimating the utility of having a guy like Trump in the White House, because I think, as Moldbug points out, he's far more valuable to the left as a source of power, as a source of energizing their base and providing a real enemy, than he is to the right for the gains that he makes. I don't want to I think where the mistake might be is then where we game it out and say, well, then we should support Biden because that'll accelerate things and everyone will blame the left. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is we do want to avoid falling in the trap of assuming that because Trump gets some policy wins because he's willing to say things that other Republicans won't. And don't get me wrong, like, that is very cathartic for me. But I think that might be part of the problem, right? Because everything that's cathartic for the right that's finally hearing some of its priorities brought to the front is actually just burning the left at a white hot fire. And of course, one take on that is, well, that means that it's going to overexpose itself and it's going to cause damage to itself, and this is going to cause legitimacy problems for the left. Or the other thing is that it pulls them back from kind of the wasting abyss that they'd be heading towards if they're constantly and obviously in power, but also constantly and obviously trying to push these woke ideas onto people. As long as they can play the part of the resistance, this gives them an air of legitimacy that they don't get if they're constantly in power and still trying to cram this stuff down people's throat. I think the woke stuff plays a lot worse if you're in power than when you're theoretically out of power.
Yeah, I'm really with you again on everything you said there. And this is kind of the other, 10% of the clear pill, the really hard to swallow part of it that, I'm just not entirely sure on yet. But what I do know is that it's really important that we do at least ask these questions and question these fundamental axioms we sort of have, that Trump buys us time, and that having him in office is actually better because of these specific policy wins. And I don't know the answer to this, and that's kind of part of the problem. Is we can't really, all we have to work with really is theory. because there's no way to go back and empirically test what would have happened otherwise. And, we can say the same for the next situation where we have either Biden or Trump, right? I can definitely imagine the case where Hillary Clinton would have been president and the left wouldn't have been nearly as insane as they are now, because I think they may have viewed the problem of the alt-right or whatever as defeated with Trump's defeat, right? Or it could have been worse, right? We just don't know. But we do need to ask these questions because there is far too much reliance, I think, on trying to work our way out of the problem of modernity through the democratic, especially federal level system. I mean, the way I see it is there really is just no way that we're going to solve our problem that way. I mean, it really doesn't matter, I think, how many based justices Trump puts into office, and maybe we can get a trickle of good Congress people in there, but I don't think there's any way we're actually going to outpace progress through these normal electoral means. And I think that's the real thing to focus on, because I think we know that for sure, basically. At least I think we're a lot more sure about that than whether or not it's going to be better to have Trump or Biden in office.
Well, so I have a couple of related questions. So one, all this talk of acceleration or whatever, and I know there's all these different definitions of that, but I mean, to me, I saw somebody on Twitter the other day say, like, acceleration isn't a good idea because you can tell, like, you would think that all these mask mandates and all this stuff would have, that would have been an acceleration kind of thing, but everybody just put the masks on, right? And everybody, I mean, yeah, okay, some people in very sparsely populated areas, like where I live, they don't really care or whatever. But there's still so many people, even in small towns, just like raging at people for not wearing masks. And it's like, everybody's just going to fall in line with no matter what happens. So it's like, is the accelerationism thing even viable? Because everybody's just going to, like, nobody's going to like snap out of it anyway. And then the other thing I wanted to ask was, like, so we talk about the left being, they have all these successes and all this stuff. But I wonder though, because like they're totally demoralized, or at least they act like they are. And so it's like, are they lying? Like, I mean, do we have to play like 7D chess or whatever here? Because it's like they act like they're demoralized. We act like we're demoralized. But yet both of them are saying that the other person is super successful. So is it just like a lie to try to get sympathy? Or, you know what I mean? That's what I don't understand.
Well, the second one's a bit easier, so I'll go for that first. I think the vast majority of left-wingers are honest when they believe in the big bad right-wing menace that's constantly in control of everything, and they're always just like one election away from, like, I don't know, returning to the not just the 1950s, the 1850s. I've known enough left-wingers. I've had enough left-wing friends, including I mean, for that matter, I've had enough left-wing like professors and stuff. I don't think they're all just lying to me. I think they're honest when they, like, with this paranoia that they have. I think the reason for it is because the left-wing worldview, sort of at its core, is the idea of like the permanent revolution, that they're always the underdog fighting some sort of revolution. So I don't know if it's even really possible for them to conceptualize themselves as the ruling class. Even in a place like the Soviet Union, and I'm of course not saying all left-wingers are equivalent to communists. This is just a good example. But even in like the Soviet Union, there was still the understanding there that they might be the ruling class in that one country, but they're still fighting the global revolution where they're the underdog. So I don't know if it's even really possible for them to conceptualize themselves as not the ruling, or as the ruling class, even when it seems quite obvious that they are. When it seems pretty clear that the people that are determining social policy are about a dozen different major institutions, all of which are dominated by left-wingers. And I'm sorry, what was the first question? Or did anyone else want to add anything to that or contradict or whatever?
Well, just to remind, the thing I was asking, I guess it wasn't really a question, but I was just saying, like, I'm not really sure accelerationism is viable because, I mean, we saw with the mask, it's like, I mean, so you're gonna shut down the entire economy. You're going to, mandate all the masks and all this other stuff. And, you would think that that would have been enough to like make people, whatever the heck accelerationism's goal is, you would have thought that that would have been enough to do it, but it didn't. Everybody just complied. Everybody just did exactly what they were told, and nothing changed. So
Right,
it's like,
yeah.
is it really actually going to do any good?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone here is an accelerationist. Accelerationism is pretty cringe. With that said, I think it's at least theoretically possible that there could be certain circumstances in which accelerating certain trends could be helpful. It just seems like it's logical that there should be certain circumstances where that would work out. But I can't really think of any currently where that would be a good strategy. The problem with accelerationism is if you look up at any point over the past 70 years, there's many things that which people would have thought that it can't get past this point, or it's just going to be too crazy and people are going to really stand up against this. And people they've constantly said this thing. I mean, I remember when the gay marriage decision happened in the Supreme Court in the U.S. I thought like there's no way that all these red states are going to stand for this and just allow this to happen, and it all went through. There was like one county clerk in the entirety of the United States that even tried to prevent it. It just the left has all the institutional power in the civil service and everything. People when power tells you to do something, people usually fall in line.
Accelerationism is for esoteric philosophers and teenage gamers that live in bunkers, supported by their upper middle class parents.
I mean, to defend accelerationism, and I recently did a video on it. There is a logic to it, and the idea is basically that the current the capitalist system, basically, or techno capital, basically inevitably leads to a certain place, and it's better to get there sooner rather than later. And so you're basic, and this comes from the classic Marxist perspective of capitalism being a necessary phase towards the path to socialism. It's basically something you have to burn through in order to actually get to the place you want to be. So it's not just sort of a lol so random philosophy or fundamentally unserious. I mean, I guess to some extent, well, I guess it depends on how serious you consider socialist, but I mean it does have a logical, coherent theory behind it. That being said, I don't support accelerationism. I don't think it's the right idea, but it's not so much of a meme as some people might make it appear to be. I mean, there are definitely a lot of meme accelerationists out there, and I think fortunately accelerationism doesn't really have much traction. I definitely wouldn't lump any of the main strains of neo-reaction at this point into accelerationism. I think the Moldbugian style is the dominant strain at the moment, and I think that's a good thing. The place I see that leading, which I think would probably be the ideal democratic outcome, would basically be if voter turnout went to like 20% or 10% or something. Like if no one voted, basically, the regime would lose its veneer of legitimacy, and then I think something else could potentially claim some sort of legitimate sovereignty, right? Because as long as we have even 40% voter turnout, which would be a record low, I think that's still enough of a democratic participation rate for the regime's legitimacy base to sustain itself. It's hard for me to imagine, though, if only 10% of the population voted in federal elections, how the federal government would be able to maintain any veneer of legitimacy at that point. And it's also hard for me to imagine how it would actually be possible for it to, it would be possible for it to maintain it through force, but I don't really think that the federal government would get very far in doing that, because it is fundamentally composed of people from the state. It's not from the various states. It's not an outside force. And I don't really think the people in the U.S. are capable of that kind of civil conflict at this point. So I think if you go fully into the clear pill paradigm, I think the logical end state is basically null participation in voting, and I think that is actually something that can make room for a different regime. How to actually get to that point, though, if it's even possible, is something I don't understand at this point. So I'm definitely not recommending not voting. But if we could figure out a way to get there, I think that would be ideal. The problem is, I think in some sense, to get there, the right wing would basically have to exit politics, which would cede control of politics to the left for some amount of time. But I think that they would be able to maintain that for a very short period of time, and it might be something we necessarily have to go through. I'm curious, what do you think of that, Aaron? As you seem, I guess, most in tune with this line of thinking.
Well, I guess I hate to go completely clear pill as we keep talking about, but I guess what I keep thinking about is, like, what does a success even look like building off of Trump? Like, let's say, because we're talking about, like, okay, well, at least these little victories like build power or these type of things. So let's think about this for a second. What if we finally get this mythical Supreme Court victory? Like, finally, conservative justices actually vote in a conservative manner. It's not a smokescreen. We actually get a real solid conservative majority that's actually going to go after some of the real meat of the progressive agenda. Let's say they go after
Scalia.
I'm sorry. Well, let's say they go after something like Roe, or they go after something like birthright citizenship, or they go after something like gay marriage. And let's assume that they actually do make a ruling against it. What do we think that looks like? Like, let they make that ruling. Do we see compliance? Do we think that that's going to work the way? Because I think a lot of right-wingers think we get the people on the court and then they pass the thing, which never happens anyway. But assuming it does, then they assume that we just see compliance, like the left's just going to roll over and shrug the way that the right did when ridiculous rulings get passed by the Supreme Court the other direction. I don't see that happening. And that's when I think things get interesting. I guess it pushes things to the edge, but does it get you a win, or does it just become clear that no matter what the right wins at that point, the rest, the institutional power spread across the rest of the country is never going to move along those lines? I'm interested to see what people think would happen if we saw a win like that from a conservative Supreme Court. Do you think we'd actually see compliance? Do you think that would actually create a victory?
Well, what they would do is they just the next election they just pack it and then reverse the decision. But I was saying that whoever votes that way will end up like Scalia. Why do you think Kavanaugh and these other guys vote in such a ridiculous manner? They're afraid. And honestly, I would also be afraid if I was Kavanaugh, looking at what happened even in the middle of Trump's term. We like to think that it's accelerated and gotten a bit more heated in the past few months. I accept that, but really, that midterm phase was also unprecedentedly bad in terms of the Kavanaugh scandal and the things that they were saying and the precedents that they were putting to try and win that fight. So first of all, it's intimidation, and second of all, they'll just break the rules in another way. And even with the Supreme Court, which is a perfect point for this, they can weasel around in a way that it's not breaking any of the rules, because there's no constitutional principle saying there has to be only 9 justices. So they'll just say it's necessary.
I would even go a step beyond what Aaron was talking about there, because this is, again, something I've been thinking about as I'm writing this script for the next video about what we're talking about here. And I would take it a one step further and even say, even if you could somehow pull off the incredible of getting of kicking all of the bums out, as they say, and voting in new guys, basically based congressmen, a Trump-like president, even if you somehow manage this through all of the bad press, which I don't even know how you would do, since we basically live in a press-controlled state, right? But let's say you did. then what happens? You've elected like 500 people or so, right, to the two houses in the presidency. What do they do then? They could even stack the Supreme Court with more justices, like 21st Reaction said, and formally control all of the branches of government. But as we see with Trump's recent executive orders against critical race theory, I mean, even if you have all of these politicians allegedly in charge, is the whole system just going to, lay down and give up and submit? I don't think that would happen. I think it would just thrash, at 1,000%, maybe 10 times more than we see now, and still not give in to these formal legislators, the people who are supposed to be in control. I think we would see the system for what it really is. And maybe that could actually bring it down at the end of the day. Although this is a hypothetical that I don't think we can get to. So I think that kind of really, I think, elucidates the point. Is when I envision a 100% like reactionary Congress, literal reactionaries, I still don't see how they would actually get what we want done, because they could write all of the laws they want, and they're simply not going to be obeyed, because the government and the whole system is so much more than just these, elected politicians. There's 99% of the government are all of these completely progressivized bureaucracies that are simply not going to obey those people. So I can't. I mean, so I guess to get back to Arad's question, what I would see happening is, just a leftist counter reaction. Basically, I think it's almost like one of the, I think it's a Gordian knot. The more you struggle against it, or Gordian, I think, is the one that can't be untied. But whatever, the more you struggle against the knot, just the tighter it's going to become around you. I don't think there's the incremental path doesn't work, right? So, in my hypothetical there, I suggested, like, if you somehow manage to re-elect all the Congress people you wanted at once, which isn't even possible because it's done on various years, and you don't even get to replace the whole Congress at once. So you're kind of forced to do it incrementally. So let's say it would take, almost a decade or something like that, maybe half a decade, to actually rotate out the entire Congress. And just how are you going to get the changes you want done, even if you could pull that off in that time frame? I can't figure out how that would actually work. And this is really important because, what Aaron is getting at is we have to actually like visualize, lay out, write down. We need to be able to actually describe what a victory looks like. And I can't figure out what that could possibly look like inside of the current democratic political system.
Yeah, as much as it pains me to say it, because I really don't like the answer, the more I think about what Moldbug has said, the more it seems correct. Like, the path forward through the small victories that someone like Trump provides just does not seem like it's ever going to be enough to make that big shift. We talk about buying time, but buying time for what, right? Like, what are we planning to do that? And again, this is not me saying everybody go vote Biden, or I'm not playing that game. I think Moldbug goes too far when he does that, because it starts to feel disingenuous. It starts to feel.
Has Moldbug ever actually?
I don't think he has.
Yeah,
he said it laughingly.
I'm pretty sure I've watched all the interviews Moldbug's done recently. I haven't read all the articles, so if there's something in there that I might have missed. But all I've really gotten the impression from, I've never really gotten the impression from him that he's actually endorsed Joe Biden per se.
I don't think he has. I think at most he's kind of said some edgelord stuff about it.
Because I remember in the open letter that it was in the run up to the 2008 election. So he talked about Obama a lot there, and he said things that at least on the surface sound really complimentary. He said that the Obama campaign was a really good campaign, and that Obama was really good at what he does and that type of stuff. And to I don't know, someone that doesn't understand what he's trying to say, I could understand how that sounds like an endorsement. But that was I know with that, at least, that clearly wasn't the point he was trying to make. And I can't remember exactly what the statements people are referring to with Joe Biden from Moldbug, but from what I remember, I don't think it really seems quite that accurate to say he endorsed him.
Well, I would agree. I would agree up until his recent podcast appearance, the one I just listened to with the good old boys, Bog Beef, who's been on my channel, got to interview Moldbug, and they just posted that today. And before that, I think you're right. Normally when people said, "Oh, he's endorsing Biden," I was like, I think he's joking. He's making a patronage joke. because his parents were in the civil service and like his stepdad worked for him. And
I
so
know Richard Spencer is unironically endorsing Biden.
Well, he's a brainlet, so ignore
Yes.
him.
yeah, that's pretty much whatever he says. Just ignore. But I think up until that point, I would have agreed that yes, I don't think it should have been taken seriously. But in his last appearance, it really did sound like he was saying, "Look, I think that is the better outcome." Like, not that he thought Joe Biden was better governance, but basically, like, look, they're going to burn this country down if we don't elect Joe Biden. So
Ultimately, if I could say something, is I think what a better
Sorry, one sec. Just in case it's not clear for everyone, Fritz Imperial has joined us.
Hi, guys. But ultimately, what I think is that both having a much longer and broader term perspective and a much smaller, localer one is actually better, in the sense of I think that if there's candidates and if there's people and propositions on the local level that will do things like help close abortion clinics down, and really that's the most important thing, at least in terms of practical political action we can take in terms of laws, and in the more long-term sense of the fact that the current two-party liberal democratic system is ultimately not going to help our cause. That's what I think we should be looking towards. And well, I think ultimately for this election, I know people probably thought about this up until 2016, we should try and get Trump elected, or it probably would be better for Trump to be reelected. I still think for looking towards 2024 and onwards, ultimately continuing to vote and keeping up the circus is ultimately towards our detriment.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of Moldbug's entire point, and you know, in his I guess the gray mirror, if we consider that canon, what Moldbug formally recommends is that you make yourself as useless as possible to each side, and it sounds like he's kind of contradicting that in some of the things he's saying about Biden. Maybe he's just making, I don't know. I'm not going to bother defending those statements. We should get Moldbug on stream so we can, call him a retard for thinking Biden should win, basically. That seems to get too far into the accelerationist type of thinking. And I think at best, if you're going to be clear-pilled, it is just an exit strategy, right? It's not accelerationist, and any step into acceleration, I don't think is a good idea.
I mean, ultimately, what I put in my super chat is it's an idea that I've been mulling around for a while. Is not decelerationist or accelerationist, but just kind of something parallel to that, in the sense of trying to get people as depolitical as possible, or in the sense of in the grander scheme of things, right? Of what did the 20th century, or at least the progressives of the late 20th century, offered people pleasure. They offered people, in a world in which the concept that there was no ultimate meaning to life was accepted, when the left could offer them free sex, drugs, and whatever they wanted. That's essentially how they won the culture war. But now, obviously, in the 21st century, when people are learning the hard way that just can't bring them meaning to life, and people want deeper meaning, nothing can give that to them the same way like religion can, or essentially the Catholic faith can. I think trying to attract people to that. What I would also said was, like, the Mormons seem to have it pretty well, right? In the sense that they vote Republican, they vote conservative, they vote pro-life and traditional marriage, but at the same time, their main focus is on building up their own religious communities.
Well, sure, but I mean, isn't there's always going to be power wielded somehow, and so I mean, if you're talking about like taking, so Fritz said the long-term approach and the local approach. Okay, so why isn't that getting into local politics? And
I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah. So I mean, the other thing I was thinking too is like, to me the long term, it's like, I mean, I need some time. Like I got 3 kids. I need some time to like turn my truck into a Mad Max rig and like teach my kid how to shoot from like.
And I think that's the difficulty, right? There is a difference between people like me or people that are in their early 20s and late teens that don't have families yet versus older people in their late 20s.
I need you guys to be the frontline warriors,
Yeah, and I think it's a balance that has to be struck between understanding of what can be good for the short and medium term, as in the next 10, 15, 20 years, which can help me raise my family, versus thinking towards the next future generations, and that like we can all kind of agree that the whole liberal democratic system isn't something that's sustainable, or at least isn't conducive towards wanting a solid Christian Catholic community.
Right.
And I think that's the balance I have, is trying to support things locally and trying to support, I guess on the larger scale, anything that tries to decentralize power.
Yeah, the one thing about local politics, though, that I've been thinking about is I feel like this is kind of like, well, the way I've been viewing this problem recently is sort of a problem of sovereignty. Like USG has all the sovereignty, we have none. And if you want sovereignty, how do you get it? Well, if you couldn't build a fruit market inside of Walmart, right? And if you did, maybe that fruit market would be really successful. But Walmart is sovereign over that territory, and it's never going to let you do that. And I think the U.S. government is kind of the same way. You know, it's like the Walmart of governments, basically. It's hard for me to imagine how it would really let you build up any serious degree of sovereignty within its own territory unless something changed with the federal government. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't be considering using local politics to your advantage, but that local politics in itself can't simply build up to something greater than the sum of its parts as long as USG has a monopoly on sovereignty. Because once you get powerful enough, it's going to deal with that competitor. So I'm not sure. I guess in some way this is kind of just an extension of the problem we've been talking about, whereas ultimately all power does flow through the federal government, right? There's no way around that, and it sort of leaves irrelevant decisions that don't really matter to its power to state or local governments. But anything that really does matter, it is going to destroy.
But I was just saying, weren't you just talking about how even if, say, all three branches of the federal government were occupied by, say, very conservative pro-life justices, senators, and representatives, would it be enough? And it's clear saying there is certainly a lot of other aspects or locuses of power, though you could be right in saying that things like big media, big tech, and big business, they're also fairly centralized. So wouldn't that kind of feed into the idea that working towards decentralization of smaller businesses, smaller government, would ultimately make it easier to be able to change things?
I do think it's worth pursuing that avenue for people who have expertise in that area. But I've been reading, I've been catching up on some Moldbug recently, and I was reading his essay about Bit Zion. And I think this is the kind of way we need to be thinking about sovereignty, is how to hack it, basically. Like what he describes in terms of Bitcoin becoming a state is sort of completely outside of the domain of how we normally think about sovereignty, which independence is one of the main aspects of sovereignty, and also legitimacy. And there's a third one I can't remember at the moment. But I think this is a much more likely to succeed methodology to try and approach the problem is to basically bypass it completely by outmaneuvering it in ways that it isn't really capable of dealing with. Because like the problem of trying to compete with the federal government on the level of sovereignty with the democratic system is that's what it's built for, right? Like that's the one arena where it's simply the top dog. It knows absolutely how to handle this. It's even adapted to Trump at this point to a large degree. So to me, that's almost like the last place you should really be going in order to actually deal with the current problem. And that's not to say no place, right? I'm saying the last place is in, if there is nothing else you can conceivably do in other areas, then okay, maybe that's a last resort of how to participate in this, greater fight we're in against modernity. But I do think it is kind of the last place we really should be looking.
Yeah, I think one of the big mistakes that we make when we do that is there's a reason, especially in Yarvin's latest essay, that he explains the political system that we see as the show. Because we look at the levers of power and we believe the story about the levers of power, and we say if we just held these levers of power, then it would do the thing we want it to do. But the problem is then we see someone like Trump, or we see maybe a conservative Supreme Court come to power, and none of the things that are supposed to happen when you hold the levers of power actually happen. You finally get the amazing weapon, and you find out it's actually just a plastic fake gun, because the power isn't in those tools. That's why it's called the show. We think the power flows from these places, and it doesn't. That's why it's useful, is it distracts from where power actually flows from. So when we're obsessed with playing this game, we're always in a position where we're playing for pieces that don't matter, and that always is setting you up for a loss.
I would say they do matter, and that the game works. It's just that the whole game is kind of set up for a certain type of person to be able to win it, right? It's like the super weapon is only programmed for these like certain types of neoliberals to be able to wield it. It'll just kind of crumble in your hand. It's like Aragorn taking the blade of the ring wraith, right? And it shatters in his hand, and it doesn't shatter on theirs because it's meant for them.
Yeah, well, this is what I talked about. I just did a video on comparing like Obama's Dear Colleague letter to Trump's critical race theory executive order. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Obama looks like he's powerful because Obama's agenda is lined up with the cathedral's agenda. It's lined up with the soft power agenda that extends outside the government. Obama is no more functionally powerful than Trump is, right? Like officially they have exactly the same power level, they have exactly the same abilities, they hold the same office. But Obama is infinitely more powerful because the real power Obama's wielding is not the power of the presidency. It's just that when he's in the presidency, it lines up with other powers that allow him to do the things we actually see as powerful. And I think that's the mistake people are making, is they see what he can do in that position, and we say, oh, well, the progressives are powerful when they have the executive branch. No, the progressives are powerful. And so then when they act as executives, it looks powerful.
It's like if you're using the cathedral analogy, right? It's as if you have one bishop who has a certain set of ideas, and he's able to get a huge amount done in his diocese, even because he has the support of all of the priests and all of the other lay organizations. And then you get another bishop in who has completely different ideas, and he's basically able to enact almost nothing, even though they both technically have the same power.
Yes, roughly.
I guess my thing is like, why not just do the Vermeulen tactic? Why not just buy stock in Walmart, right? Like, why not just get in there? And I mean, like, I'm hearing you when you're saying like all the reasons why you can't, but I mean, and I know something about Moldbug. I don't know. I haven't read all the stuff, but it's like, I mean, presumably Vermeulen isn't an idiot, and he's aware of the Moldbug arguments, but it's like, I mean, why not just try to get in? I mean, and he's I don't know, somewhat successful in that, I guess. Why not just you become the one that's taking the reins? I mean, I don't see why that's not possible. And I mean, and that's I guess one of my problems. I feel like, I'm not a huge fan of whatever liberal democracy or whatever, but it seems like if the only solution is to like kind of turtle up and do the local thing like the Mormons, I mean, and it's like, I mean, there's always going to be large centralized power. I mean, it's always going to be there. So, I mean,
well, again, I mean, if we're thinking about large centralized power in the concept of the state, that's a relatively modern invention. Again, you talk about, say, stuff pre the 30 Years' War, the idea of the state just didn't really exist in the West. But I mean, and a more direct response to your question is the fact that, like, unless your entire purpose, which mine would be, is if, say, you're working your way up through the ranks of Walmart or through government, and your entire purpose is ultimately to dismantle them, it's not really going to work. You saw this with people like Ron Paul, who the deep state, and whatever you want to call it, was never going to let somebody like him, whose entire kind of platform was explicitly about dismantling the deep state, or dismantling the a huge part of the centralized government and ending the military industrial complex and ending the Fed. Like, almost clearly he was really popular, but I'm almost certain that he was unfairly kind of ejected from being able to become the candidate.
Yeah, I guess so. My response would be, I'm aware that, things were different in 1350 than they are now, but that doesn't mean that there's any way to go back to that. You know what I mean? Like, to me, what I'm saying is, maybe it's taking this a little too far, but Leo the 13th called his famous encyclical "New Things," right? The new things. It's like, this is just the way stuff's going to be. And so if there's going to be centralized power, then you might as well you might as well just grab the reins and take care of, take a hold of it if you can. Because it doesn't mean that, just because things haven't ever been this way doesn't mean they're not going to ever going to go back, right?
The point, though, is that the way things are currently are incredibly detrimental to what we ultimately believe in. And the point is that
maybe
participating in the way things are is, again, if I was to be a politician, if I was to try and run for president or something, again, a large part of my platform would be essentially trying to dismantle as much power the federal government has as possible, which obviously, unless that somehow managed to resonate with an enormous majority of the population, of the voting population, it wouldn't work, or it would make you unelectable.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that's the goal. I don't think the goal is to do that, personally.
All right.
Well, that's the problem, though, right? Because if you go back to the example we were talking about earlier, the hypothetical, the system has metastasized to a point where power has sort of flowed out of the formal federal government itself. So even if you actually get enough people to that level, they aren't effectively in control of the regime anymore. Like people wonder like how this concept of woke capital came about, right? Well, the way it came about is, for decades now, it's been illegal basically to not employ certain protected races of people. And I'm using race in the general term, like women are protected race now, basically, right? So it's literally illegal to not employ these people. And now it's gotten to the point where these institutions have been like this. These institutions have been like this for so long that they've now fully adopted this as part of their ideology, and they're simply beyond the control of the federal government. So even if you removed all of these race laws and went back to how things are, these other parts of the cathedral that it has spawned to decentralize and thus protect itself from what you're talking about doing there, all of this stuff is now set in stone so that they're going to resist you and not let you in. So that's sort of the problem is I guess, in one sense, I agree. If we could actually take the levers of power, that would be good. But the problem is the levers of power just aren't in the same place they are anymore. They're much more distributed, and it's so difficult. We don't have the resources to actually attack all of these different places at once. Like, the only real way to deal with such a large decentralized system that can basically, it can take a lot of flack in any one sector and not collapse, is to hit it everywhere at once. And I don't really see how we have the resources to do that, because
you talk about woke capital, right? It's one religion runs everything. So just replace that religion with our religion, and then I don't know how you do that, but it's like,
well, I think to do that you need sovereignty
or something, right?
That's what you need to do. Is you need some sort of sovereignty in order to protect your thing. Sovereignty is independent. It doesn't
depend.
The
Vatican.
Well, we don't control the Vatican, though.
It's something that you have to build up from the ground upwards, not try and attack by getting the right people elected in the end. Right. If you can create, in our community where we have a large Catholic population, we have a whole bunch of stores that we are always going to support. And if something happens, we have the whole kind of community to help give them money so that, mom and pop Catholic run grocery store doesn't get bought out by Walmart. That's just kind of a small example of ultimately what makes people able to withstand this, right?
I mean, I think what you actually need is it needs to be legal to build up competitor organizations to woke capital, basically. Because the thing is, all of these stupid race laws and diversity laws and all this have really just diluted the talent pool. And if you had, a small number of people who are very, very competent, you could very easily build up a system that is going to just completely outcompete all of these idiots, frankly, that are currently dominating the market.
That's the real black pill. I have to hire a woman.
Yeah, but the thing is, so that's why
if your choice is between being forced to select between the idiocracy and somebody whom maybe doesn't share your own politics, but he'll ultimately actually get results and is somewhat competent, that might be a saving grace.
And this problem is one of the reasons I've become interested in this idea of private law society recently. Basically as a means of establishing a degree of sovereignty to actually safely build up corporations, basically, that are currently illegal to create, right? You literally cannot create the thing that we would like to see in terms of how you would run a business or any organization in the United States right now. You can't do it legally if you're a white Christian male or any kind of normal person, frankly. But the problem is sovereignty isn't up for grabs in the U.S. at all. So we have to figure out, like Bitcoin, I guess, is one particularly weird example of that. But we need to figure out alternative means of securing something sovereign for ourselves that can provide, the base to actually build up organizations that function better than the existing system. And I think the goal here is when people see this work, which I think it would, they would basically also want to do it, right? Like, I think in effect, you would basically see a large majority of conservatives in the U.S. basically become libertarians purely for practical reasons, because they would see that if they were actually free to basically build their own private society from the ground up, they could, on a completely voluntary basis and actually construct their vision independent of the rest of the United States, then that would be something they would actually want to do. And I think that in terms of actually like reclaiming our homeland, which I think is something we ultimately want to do, I think that is a very long-term but potentially viable way out of the problem, is to actually just lead by example, basically, like physically create the type of places, communities, organizations, companies that we want to see in our own country somewhere else, and use that as basically a jumping off point to actually show people that there is a better way, a more sane way to govern ourselves in the 21st century than this very outdated paradigm we're in now.
Or essentially also just kind of create more and more connections so that people have an alternative outside the cathedral, right?
Provide an exit, yeah, basically.
So it's like, and it can be from anywhere. Say you're like a small-time artist, right? Like visual artist that's Catholic, and you don't want to have to deal with all the other, hassle that goes through Tumblr and whatever else, and things that can get you banned if you say, "Oh, I'm devoutly Catholic and I'm pro-life." If there's a whole support system, like the Distributus has said numerous times, of like how ridiculous it is that like some relatively much smaller but very progressive YouTubers can manage to get way more money through Patreon and whatever than somebody that has far more subscriptions and far more views than they do. If you can kind of create ultimately essentially controlled by us, by conservative Catholics, system in which I called it in the chat, essentially, if we're fighting against the cathedral, what we have to be is a very strong, lasting, starting out very small parish community.
It is of course well known my extreme avarice, and everyone should donate to Settlers Lament. But seriously, it's like pulling teeth.
I did.
To get, yes, thanks. It's like pulling teeth to get people to give me like $3 a month. And like I have people talking with me like, oh, we should build like a based Catholic commune or something like that. And like, yeah, that'd be cool to build a based Catholic commune or whatever. But if I can barely get people to give me a couple of bucks, I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical that we have many people that are willing to really put down the money to do this stuff. One thing one thing that happened relatively recently, like a couple months ago, at my church, is they had a missionary coming around to ask for people to donate. And I understand, there's like middle-aged, middle-class people at my church that have a lot more money than like the kids that watch me on YouTube. But like he said something like, I can't remember how much it was, but I think it was like, if I could only get 10 people here to donate $60 a month, then I'd be good. And I was like bleep, like what? You're expecting people to donate $60 a month to you? And like I can barely get people to give me $3 a month. And
you think about that.
I'm not saying what I do is as important as a missionary. But the point is, I'm sure he is able to get people to give him that much money a month. I'm sure he wouldn't be asking if there weren't actually people willing to write checks like that. And I'm not like, I'm not just saying you should donate a lot of money to Settlers Lament, though you should donate a lot of money to Settlers Lament. But people do need to be willing to actually invest in this stuff, both with their time and with their money.
There's a title of that Brandon Niemeyer book, which is just simply called "Stop Giving Money to People That Hate You," right? And I think that's going to be a big part of it, going from the ground up, of saying, a lot of kind of normie Catholics and conservative Christians are going to be like, man, I can't give money to Netflix anymore. I'm not buying Netflix. They basically just promoted pedophilia. Like, I can't give them money. It's like, well, here's a bunch of other people you can give money to, and oh look, they're all Catholic and they all basically support, conservative views like you.
Yeah, it would be, I would describe it less like a parish and more like a underground patronage system, where you could have this underground counterculture of reactionary artifacts and art and works like that, as the mainstream entertainment industries just get grosser and grosser and grosser over time. But I will say it's very fortunate for me. They yanked my wisdom teeth out before I chipped into Cellar, so he didn't have to pull my teeth. But I also want to prevent the overdose in black pills that I've heard for the last hour or whatever. I think the problem with USG and its tendrils and the whole cathedral, the problem with it is that, of course, it's a decaying oligarchy, which becomes more stable over time because, like Charlemagne said, you can't hit it at any single spot. The solution here is that it really has to cave in on itself. Its weight has to, break its back in a sense, to the point that it weakens. So I think we can experiment. We can think about hypotheticals of how that might happen and how we could eventually overturn it after it, kind of like East Germany or something like that.
You have an example, and you need an example in which it loses, and it's shown that it's the line from Predator, right? If it bleeds, we can kill it. If the cathedral can be shown that here's this one kind of example, this substantial enough where it gets some mainstream attention, in which they try and bring something down and it just doesn't yield or buckle at all, then it's shown that, well, they can't do everything, and then they start freaking out. It's like if you have an advancing army that runs across an incredibly well-fortified defensive position and it just can't break through them, then it just has to start dealing with this new reality. And it's shown that, well, their advance is not invincible.
Well, there's a reason that collapse is always like the magic ingredient in most of Moldbug's solutions, because that is actually the right way to look at it. 21st century, I think you're right. Like, I think that we will, because progressivism is naturally fighting reality. Like, they are building a system in which you can only succeed as long as you are looking internally, right? Like hiring inept people, building business practices that will lose you money, building products that are going to do more poorly, making it environments no one wants to work in. These things are only virtuous. They are only a positive thing as long as the system continues to function and can bear the load. But at some point it will break. At some point it will run into competition that it can't outcompete with all these handicaps. And when it starts doing that, then that's when you see these things that have been built by more capable people who are not following those rules and are building a different set of rules and a different set of values, that's when those people can step in. And while I think we're far away from saying the media collapses, don't get me wrong, the media is still extremely powerful and influential, but I think that's where we're seeing the first cracks, right? Like the only reason that people are listening to as much alternative media as they are is that it's so clear that progressive media is just riddled with bias and ridiculous, and they've overplayed their hand in many ways. And so that creates opportunities. I don't think we're there yet where it collapses, but I think that is one spot where we can see, okay, there is a break, there is a chance. The eventually these policies will lead them to ruin. And so the key is not to say, how can I go grab powers, government control of things? Like, how can I go grab the levers of power in government? But understanding that when the progressive order breaks down in these areas, because it simply cannot compete correctly, that's when other opportunities arise. And it doesn't have to be the whole government going. It can be in smaller areas like entrepreneurship, like media, like art, things like this, that'll collapse before the government power would.
Power lets you deny reality up until a point. And if there's starts to be chinks in the armor, cracks, as you said, then people might be able to, if we can shine bright enough outside the cracks, people might start seeing, oh, it's kind of like if you're using Plato's analogy of the cave, it's like, yeah, it's like if you're trying to get people to wake up from the cave and get out, it's like you have to shine the light bright enough whilst the fire is starting to die down, which it is. Like, again, a lot of people are like, not to be too white pill, but there's definitely a movement of people that are from the kind of the normie right that are starting to realize that this whole system just isn't working anymore. Voting Republican isn't going to fix things.
When I was thinking of scenarios of collapse or decay or some kind of weakening, I was really thinking precisely in the economic sphere, because that's what I've been focusing on recently. And so, okay, let's take one idea of how this works. So they have a giant debt crisis that they've promoted over the years and increased by several orders of magnitude, and will probably exponentially increase in the future, in possibly the near future. They're also basically transitioning this currency from a credit currency into basically a debt-backed currency with massive increases in the money supply. Now, all this works. It can survive if they are the global hegemon. If it maintains the kind of this Anglosphere empire of basically putting all this debt onto their own citizens and foreign countries, and foreign countries still forcibly using the dollar, even though it's being saddled up with debt and it's being devalued. So if there's any possible shift in that, where the checks stop flowing, the gravy chain of dopamine stops flowing to all their supporters, that's an interesting moment where they'll have a weak spot. Because of course we think of the media and the education system, that's where the cathedral is its most powerful, when the position of production and economic sphere is kind of subsidiary to that. It's not the thing that they put all their focus on.
I wouldn't even say it's so much as when the dopamine stops flowing. It's as people start realizing that man doesn't live on dopamine alone. And again, as I said earlier, is people are, I ultimately think people are starting to realize that they need some form of deeper meaning in their lives. And the thing is, if they start realizing that Marvel movies and Pornhub can't give that to them, they're going to start looking for other answers. And I think you're going to start seeing this in places like Europe, where Islam is going to get a lot of converts from non-Muslims, because they'll be looking for some form of deeper meaning so much that they'll turn to anything. And the thing is, if you have some form of strong metaphysical idea, well, people are probably going to gravitate towards it because it can give them something that the cathedral could never give them.
I think one of the things that's worth mentioning, and this kind of relates to something Settler said quite a while back, but the idea of if only people donated X dollars a month, like I'd be totally fine or whatever. The problem with this and I guess this is something you learn when you associate with entrepreneurs for a while, is that they tend to be conservative with their money, and especially reactionary entrepreneurs are going to be extremely conservative. And there actually are some out there who are wealthy, right, and could do what you're saying. But the problem is, someone like that is always looking for, high level of competence and also a return on their investment, right? And that doesn't just mean money; it means any return whatsoever, right? So the problem is, any one of us could be supported by some base billionaire or millionaire or whatever, right? But the problem is, even if we were self-sustaining based on this donation flow, like, what would that actually do? When someone with quite a lot of money is looking to invest it in something, especially in the circumstances we on the reactionary right find ourselves in, they're basically looking to make 100-fold return at least on that investment, right? Because that's the kind of game we're playing here, where the odds are that far against us, where even 10x isn't going to do it, right? So the problem is, like, just giving people money doesn't actually really get you anywhere, because what you really want to do is focus all of that into the right project at the right time, rather than just sort of divvy it out randomly. Like, even if you had $1 billion and that was just split 6 ways between us, right? I guarantee we could just spill that money into nothing in a very short amount of time, if we didn't think this way. I mean, we wouldn't even make a dent in the cathedral with $1 billion. The smart way to use that money would be to just hold on to it and find the right thing at the right time, the right group of people, the best project you possibly could, and really just go all in on that, right? So, although it would be nice if and charitable to just sort of hand out money to allies, at the end of the day, it's just not a good strategy for any entrepreneur, right? Like, you have to, especially when you're competing in a market like the one we're competing in, every single bit of your resources available, be it money or whatever, is extremely valuable. And no one with a considerable amount of resources is just going to sort of hand it out willy-nilly, right? And this goes way beyond just like the simple desire for more money or something like that. Like I said, it's looking for a return on your investment that's really going to pay off in terms of completing your goal. So just like merely just sort of funding people blindly isn't the way those kind of people are thinking. They're really looking for something material, something real, something promising to invest in that's actually going to go somewhere. And I mean, this is one of the reasons, like, I've invested a lot of time, I guess, in the reactionary libertarian right, centered around Academic Agent, and we're working on a few software platforms. I mean, one of the main reasons I ended up like so involved in that community is because I've been searching for years at this point for the most competent right-wing people on the market, basically. And I think that side of the right, although I don't think it's recognized very publicly in our communities, is just light years ahead of everyone else in terms of their competence, their organization, the resources available, and just the way operations are run, right? I mean, at this point, and I think I've mentioned before a couple times, I'm working on this thing called Agora, which is like a Discord alternative. I mean, at this point, let's say Academic Agent's Discord communities got canceled. That wouldn't affect him at all, because we already have like an alternative thing set up, and this is because we've actually got a competent set of people making something real that other people can get involved with, and people are going to want to use this thing, right? And this is the way we really need to be thinking, and this is the way we need to be building up. It's not just sort of, not to like dunk on Settlers Lament or anything, but merely just like sort of blindly chasing more resources isn't, or just blindly handing them out, no matter which side of that you're on. That's not the way to do things, right? So, there's a lot more to the problem of capital that we have than just figuring out how to divide it up. It's where we have to be thinking much more about how we invest any capital we have, be that our time, our money, even network connections we have. So that's really the answer to, people wonder, why doesn't just some base billionaire just like fund all of us? Well, the reason is because they would just, lose all of their money very quickly and not actually get anywhere. Because if you're all of us should be thinking like entrepreneurs, basically, is what I'm saying. And the entrepreneurs are thinking like this now. And that's why they're not just, throwing out tens of thousands of dollars at us, right? It would be great if that happened, but even if we were all making that amount of money from just random base billionaires, what would that actually do? It wouldn't really do anything. We would just be able to talk on the internet full time, right? But that's not a scalable strategy, right? Because an individual person making content isn't scalable. And even look at someone like Sargon of Akkad, right? Look how much time and money he's gathered a lot of money on doing what he's doing, and he's building his own media organization right now. And that's like the biggest player in the market who's against progressivism is Sargon. And look at the small scale he's still on, right? And that's really because this whole, what we're doing here isn't really fundamentally scalable. And that's the way we need to be thinking of in terms of, how we're actually going to be spending our resources.
I think this is the most salient point that we can really take from the entire reactionary sphere, this little NRX microcosm, is that we really do need practicality. We need to long on the Soroses and the Rothschilds and really short the Bloombergs, because I thought that was the best part of the primary, actually. Bloomberg burning a quarter of his wealth and having no result from it. Like that's a perfect example of what Charlemagne's talking about, having absolutely no effect. And you'd think he'd gain traction in being in the position he was in. But anyway, I've grown very interested in noticing that there's a lot of engineers and computer science people, really techie people. It seems to be a trend in this specific sphere. Moldbug was a software engineer or something like that, to my memory. He was an entrepreneur too. Dave is doing something similar. I think he's an engineer. Luke Smith, similar to that. So there's a lot of people that are kind of experts in that specific thing that I think is going to really matter in terms of making infinitely scalable kind of techno capital structures. I think that's perfect, honestly, and that's one of the things that I think is really important about this sphere, is that techno capital, this machine is super powerful, and if we extract from it, and if we build things that will attract people through it, it will come back in dividends, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about there being a lot of engineers, and that's something I've noticed myself. And I think, and you're right, Moldbug himself was an engineer, and I think that's one of the reasons why I vibe with his whole mode of analysis so much, is because what he's basically doing is debugging the government. He thinks, like, when I read his stuff, I can see that he's thinking in the way that a programmer thinks about their program when they're debugging it. And it's kind of one of those things where you have to do it for a long time to see it and understand it. But that is how I view what he's doing. But I think we actually can, in large part, basically program our way out of the cathedral. The hard part is having a lot of engineering talent just sort of generally dispersed is one thing. The hard part is actually building the right team of people to do the right things at the right time. And I see that happening in some sectors right now, and I'm participating in some of that. And that's the hard part, right? It's like you can have all the talent in the world, but if it's not correctly directed, utilized, managed, all of that, and not properly funded, right? You need so many things at once to really get going. But I think we really are starting to make some progress in actually bootstrapping ourselves somewhere towards something sustainable. And this is a long-term way of thinking, because it does take a long time to build up these stable institutions. But it's kind of a meme, like, build your own YouTube or Twitter or whatever, right? It's actually not that hard to do that. The hard part is just making it sustainable. But if you have the right team of people working on that problem, that problem actually kind of, it becomes achievable as well. So I think.
Well, the issue with that though is, I mean, I'm no programmer, so I don't have anything to really say on that. But the issue is, from what I understand, it's relatively trivial to make like a Facebook clone or a YouTube clone or a Discord clone or whatever. The issue is these programs thrive off of their base of users, and that's what's always been impossible to get. With any of these, with certain things, it's less of an issue than with others. Like, with Discord, all that really matters is like your 500 people, whatever, that are on your Discord server. So if you can get those 500 people on a Discord alternative, it doesn't really make a difference. But even there, it does make a difference. In a certain sense of being able to actually build up that amount, because for example, I have a relatively decent Discord server. It has like 500, 600 people, pretty active, lots of VCs and stuff. But the issue, and I post my link in my chats here, or I post my link to the server on Twitter, and lots of people join because everyone has Discord, or most people have Discord, at least, that are in our age range and stuff, and that are based gamers. So it's not an issue to join. But for a lot of people, even though it's a really small hurdle to cross, for a lot of people, just making an account is going to be a hurdle, and and if they already have a Discord account, then that's not an issue for them. But if they don't already have a Discord account, then I highly doubt I could have possibly made a Discord server anywhere close to the size where it is currently. And that's one of the platforms that is less harmed by not having a big user base. With something like YouTube, I mean, we see how like bad BitChute is for being an alternative. Not just that, like, it doesn't have the greatest user interface, but it just has not been able to get the numbers. I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at the front page of BitChute, but last time it was common to see like videos on the front page with 100 views on them. And there are some people like Sticks and stuff that can get like thousands of views on BitChute videos, but they're the exception. And really, it's still not a place where you can like really build your own channel just on BitChute.
That is the social part of the problem is basically the hardest part, and I agree with you that yeah, I mean, I guess I agree that this is a really difficult piece to overcome, but I do think it is incrementally doable in a way that winning these political battles is not. I mean, one thing you see recently is people using, I mean, we're using a means of streaming outside of YouTube right now, right? And, I've noticed people using various mechanisms to achieve super chats outside of YouTube. And, you have like Fuentes and whatnot on DLive still, who still makes, hundreds of dollars a night, the fairly large user base. And Discord in particular, I think, is interesting because Discord, I think, doesn't really have the same market to lock in as like something like Facebook or YouTube does. I think that sort of general social chat, kind of almost all in one social media platform, because I mean, you can even do streaming there. I think there's still a lot of room there in that market, especially for the right wing. And I mean, you alone have 500 people on your Discord or whatever. I mean, there are tons of servers out there in other spheres that don't even really have anything to do with reactionary politics. And you could very easily get some of those on board. A Discord alternative that didn't simply ban people on accounts for no reasons. I mean, one thing I've noticed that's pretty interesting is a lot of communities have sort of independently migrated to Matrix Synapse all at the same time and like made their own servers and infrastructure basically, which I think is pretty interesting. I think that sends, I guess, like an entrepreneurial signal to me that there's a real market opportunity out there when people are sort of proactively trying to find alternative products and sometimes even going the extra mile of sort of running it themselves. I think that's a very clear market signal that people actually want something that has Discord parity out there. And it would probably be fairly, I mean, Sargon, I think on his Discord has like 10,000 people or something crazy like that on it. And right, that's a pretty sizable user base. And I think this is a market that actually can be tapped. YouTube, that's a whole other paradigm, but it's it's one of those things where you get there when you get there.
I just wanted to tell you, Charlemagne, that Nick successfully made his own streaming platform just for him individually.
Right. Well, I mean, there you go. That's something, right? And it's possible, and I'm sure he's going to remain successful there. Right. So it's not I think big tech is less of a deal breaker than people really think it is.
Well, it's one thing for really established people like Nick Fuentes, where he already had a huge following. He'll probably be able to, at least for a long time, make it work on alternative platforms. It's similarly Ethan Ralph, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. He's able to get pretty good views on alternative sites, and people have followed him around to a bunch of different places because he's already famous. But the core issue isn't how do you continue to sustain these existing properties. The core issue is how how can new people ever get attention? Because that's fine for like Nick or Ethan Ralph or whoever, but for other people, it just is not possible to build a presence on any of these alternative platforms.
I think in the case of something like a Discord community, you actually can. I mean, for YouTube, it's a lot harder because there's so many other things, on YouTube that people are already using. And yes, sometimes people are in political servers and other types of servers on Discord. But I just really do believe that the Discord case is a lot easier than you might think it is. I mean, it's also really cheap.
I did say earlier that I don't think Discord's nearly as big of a hurdle as the other platforms. But even there, I do still think it's there's still a bit of a hurdle with just the social stuff.
I mean, yeah, all of this is still really difficult, right? But also, I don't think.
But I would say Discord alternative seems like something that's actually doable. Where like the idea of becoming a prominent bit shooter purely from BitChute seems like literally impossible currently, at least. Where Discord, I could at least see it actually happen.
I can't even upload videos to BitChute right now because the site is so broken. But I mean, I think one thing to realize too is like, it's not when you're thinking about alternative tech too. I think one of the mistakes that some of these companies have made, like Gab, is to try and become like the new Twitter or like directly compete with some of these entities. But I think that's not really the way to approach the problem. I mean, there's a lot of niche. That's kind of the whole way modernity works, right? Is everyone has their niche. I mean, and I think that's what you really want to tap into, rather than trying to provide some sort of generalized solution that everyone, including your grandma, is going to get on. You really want to target specific niches, and if some alternative tech doesn't become mainstream, that's fine as long as it is sustainable and does what it needs to do for a certain community. I mean, I think that's kind of playing into, I guess, like the vanguardism attitude that a lot of us have towards what we're doing. I mean, I think in some sense, like mass appeal, mass adoption isn't really a goal in the first place. So, it's not really a problem if you would fail trying to do that, because I think that's the wrong goal to set anyway.
I mean, that's true. It's just that the opposite of like mass appeal isn't. I guess it is like small elite appeal with like 10 people watching it, but I don't think that's what we're going for either. And again, with sites like BitChute, that's where it's at for normal people. Is like you'd be lucky to get like 10 people to watch your video. But I'd like to do some super chats quickly. It's probably should have tried to get around to that sooner. Sorry, guys. But 21st violinist for $2 says Charla cutout. I believe that's a reference to the beginning of the stream. Thanks reaction. Patrick for $2. What do you say about the victims of your plan? I don't really have any idea what this guy is talking about.
He's talking about me becoming Palpatine.
Oh, okay. That makes sense then. Okay. I was thinking about different stuff then. I thought he meant like if we were to take over, like the people that would lose out and like would be unhappy with us in power is what I assumed he was referring to. But I guess he's talking about you becoming Emperor Palpatine.
Wait, no, that actually makes more sense. I was joking.
Oh, okay. I thought you were having like a discussion in the chat with him. Or something. Okay, so yes, I'm assuming he is I mean, I wouldn't refer to anyone as like the victims. So that's just like a really weird way of referring to that. I don't know if this is like a lefty or something, asking this. But I mean, yeah. So I mean, I don't even really know what to say to that. It's a really weird question. I don't. If I were to somehow like get in charge and implement my like based and red pilled Catholic stuff, there aren't any victims to that. There are people who are unhappy with it, I'm sure, but there's nothing. There's no victims. So I don't really know what to say to that. And Fritz, I mean, he basically got to talk about this anyways, but I'll read it out for $5. Said, hey, Settler, my idea is that we have mass depoliticization, bring people to the faith and convince them to abandon the whole political machine. So yeah, we already basically discussed that. And Jedi Knight Anathan Cringewalker for $10. I think my solution is better than incremental Congress shift. Reduce SCOTUS to 1 and make it the president. Unite the judicial and executive branches into a mighty vine and strangle Congress. I don't really know if that's serious or if that's a LARP too.
Well, that could be a good Caesar thing at the end of this empire.
I saw Cringewalker tweet that at us the other day, and it's a very funny thing, but I mean, it is actually doable. Technically, I don't think that would be unconstitutional. I mean, the Constitution doesn't really provide any qualifications around Supreme Court justices, so it might actually be legally possible for the president to nominate themselves. But you do have the problem with the incumbent justices, right? So,
well, I mean, it is possible to impeach justices, I think.
Yeah, I guess you kind of need your magical
court if you had enough support.
You'd need your magical based Congress, right?
Yeah.
My favorite version of this I've seen is someone said, Amy Coney Barrett goes on the court, then you put her husband on the court, then you freeze all other appointments until her children come of age. You place each one of them on the court. Catholic monarchy, game over.
Based. But yeah. So I don't know. I don't really have anything to say to that plan. Augustine for $5 Australian says, "Fine, I'll sign up to your Patreon." Shaking my head. Thank you very much. And Brad for $31 Australian. Really enjoying the stream. I'm wondering if there is any Catholic objections to the objections in the scriptures to the idea that the Big Bang was God asking the question, what happens if he destroys himself, and that we are all God's debris. I mean, that definitely is completely incompatible with any form of Christianity, never mind Catholicism specifically. I don't really know anything about that idea. I believe I did get a super chat once before, something about God's debris, so I'm assuming this comes from the same concept. But God is existence itself. So to say what would happen if God didn't exist is an illogical question. It's self-contradictory. So it doesn't mean anything to say what if God destroys himself. That's like saying what if there's a triangular circle. The question just like doesn't mean anything. But thank you for the donation. And sorry that I couldn't give anything more in depth, but that's all I really have to say for that. And Windowlick for $5 American. We need to recruit the artists who were able to track down down the seed for pack.png in Minecraft and build it as our base infrastructure? I have no idea what that means. The autists, not the artists. But still, I don't really understand
That's
what this
extremely
question...
esoteric.
Yeah. Yes. Autism superpowers are needed to save the West. I agree. Thank you, Windowlick. And death by cognitive dissonance. How does one contribute if they're a low status person? Many have time and conviction. Few have the wealth, status, or networking. Honest ideas, please. Anyone else would like to answer that last one?
Just make yourself useful to someone for anything. I mean, surely you can find some way to be useful, even if it's just to people who depend on you, or something like wife, children, parents, whatever. It's pretty easy to shouldn't say easy, but it's simple to think of some way to be useful to someone. So you could always just start there.
You could also pray the rosary, and also very important, be a patron for your countercultural, artistic producers and talking heads like Settlers Lament.
I mean, the good thing about donating is that it's like literally the easiest thing you could possibly do. There's lots of other things I'd like you to do for me. Like if you want to do art for the channel, that'd be really cool. If you want to do art for other people, that'd be really cool. If you want to write books sort of exploring distant ideas, all that would be really cool. The issue with that is most people can't really do that type of stuff. So I mean, those are some of the basic stuff like art, whether it's for content creators or it's even better if it's not, honestly. Art that just is sort of exploring distant ideas, whether that's like whether that's writing or whatever. Any of that would be really good. In particular, if we can have if I'm assuming many of us no longer are subscribed to Netflix with the QT stuff. It is necessary to have non-progressive entertainment, and most non-progressive entertainment really sucks. But if you're able to do like actually decent short films that have like anti-progressive themes, that'd be cool. But again, the issue with a lot of this stuff is is like most people don't have the ability or the time to do any of these things. And yeah, I mean, like I would say, pray the rosary, get a wife. Those are like some of the best things you can do, or become a priest. I don't know. Anything else anyone have?
I mean, just think of the most basic pronomian thing you could possibly do. I mean, if you really can't think of anything, just go like scrub your bathroom or something, right? Like do anything that's of some use. Something that makes the world more orderly. Like it's really easy to find a place to start. If you,
in the end, Jordan Peterson gets us all, right? Go clean up your room.
Yeah, clean your room.
You beat me to it. I was going to say something also more accessible than being an art producer would be developing a relationship with your local clergy and that parish. Excuse me. Just imagine the wonderful effectiveness of being a reactionary Grima Wormtongue in the ear of your local priest. Hey, did you know that freedom is slavery and stuff? Just whisper into his ear.
Sorry. Sorry, I zoned out there for a moment. I'll assume I can just move on. I didn't really hear what you guys were saying. Yes. And we have a couple more super chats, so I'll go through those. Hank Reardon for $2. I don't discuss this person on my channel who the super chat is about, but thank you very much for the $2 Canadian. And the new IKB for £5. I respect Catholicism once you clean up the Vatican and get a based and red-pilled pope. That or go full schism and set up an anti-pope. I mean, thanks for the money, but I mean, that's cringe. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't any. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't any problems with corruption in the church. There is now, and there has been forever. I mean, one of the 12 apostles was pretty corrupt. There, there's corruption in the Middle Ages, there is corruption in the Renaissance, there's corruption now, and I'm not saying that we can't do better with the corruption. I'm like just saying that there's always been corruption doesn't mean that that we should just ignore it or anything. The point I'm just making when I say there's always been corruption is that it's nothing extraordinary. It's nothing that like, oh, shocking, there's corruption now. There's never been corruption before, because it's always been a problem. It's always something that the church needs to do better with, because any is too much. But I don't know. I mean, if you're the type of person that's constantly ragging on the Pope for being like cringe and blue-pilled and stuff, you're probably just stupid and reading headlines. I don't know what's the liberal stuff the Pope has done. I guess he's kind of pro-immigration and he's kind of anti-death penalty. But even both of those are massively over-exaggerated. What else is there? I mean, I know I saw an academic agent yesterday or today or something complain about what the Pope said on some economic stuff. And, I understand academic agent is a classical liberal. I understand why he would be upset with what the Pope's saying on economics. But what Pope Francis has said on economics is no more radical than what any other Pope for the past 100 years has said. It's not socialism. It's rerum novarum. It's exactly what Pope Leo XIII taught. It's very standard Catholic stuff. I understand that like American conservatives and libertarians and classical liberals and stuff may not like it, but the church has never taught libertarian economic policy, and that's nothing at all unique to Pope Francis. I don't know. A lot of people seem to have the belief that Pope Francis is like pro-LGBT. That's I mean, if by pro-LGBT you mean like he loves everyone as like any Christian is supposed to, yeah. But if by pro-LGBT you mean he doesn't condemn the traditionally condemned sexual acts, then no. I mean, he's been very clear that his opinions on sexual morality are fully orthodox. So yeah. I don't know. Like, I mean, why I like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's the big issue with Pope Francis? I mean, I disagree with some of the stuff he says on immigration. Cool. I mean, immigration isn't like the things. There could be issues of immigration that are a matter of faith, but the things that Pope Francis has said have like nothing to do with matter of faith. They're just his personal opinions on immigration, and I'm free to dissent from. I'm free to dissent from his personal opinions on immigration. So yeah, there's no requirement that there's no requirement that like Catholics have to all agree with every single thing the Pope says on immigration. That it's not magisterial, it's not binding on the faithful. And the death penalty. I mean, Edward Fazer's written tons of stuff on this. It's all pretty good. I think the Pope has made. I think the Pope has made some mistakes on the death penalty. I don't really agree with his personal position on it, but ultimately, all Pope Francis has said is the death penalty is immoral in certain circumstances, and the death penalty is moral in certain circumstances. Pope Francis is of the opinion that currently there are no. That currently there are no circumstances in which the death penalty can be morally applied in like today. I disagree with him. That's fine. That's Catholics are allowed to disagree on when certain things can be applied and when certain things can't be. It would only be heresy if Pope Francis said the death penalty is intrinsically immoral, which he has not said, and he will never say, because it is not possible for the Pope to teach error. If he does say that, I'll stop being Catholic. And I'm not going to like become a sedevacantist or anything, because that's stupid. I'll just stop being Catholic, because that will mean that the promise that Christ gave to Peter in Matthew 16 would be false. But Pope Francis has not taught error on the death penalty or anything else, and he won't. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, those are most of the mistakes. When I said mistakes, I don't mean that he made mistakes in doctrine. I mean that he made mistakes in ways to apply specific doctrine. And there's nothing wrong with that. Peter made mistakes in how to apply the faith as established. There's nothing wrong with. And the Pope is not infallible in all circumstances. Like, read the Wikipedia page on papal infallibility if you don't understand it, which I'm sure you don't. If you're bringing up papal infallibility, the Pope is only infallible when defining dogmas ex cathedra from the chair. But yes. So I don't even know if mistake is the right way to phrase it, but it is fully possible for it is fully possible for it is fully possible for the Pope to make mistakes in saying that I think this particular application of the death penalty is immoral, but it is actually moral in that particular circumstance. There's there's nothing there's nothing that conflicts with Catholic doctrine in saying the Pope could make a mistake like that. That has nothing to do with an ex cathedra statement. But yeah, sorry, I know that's a bit of a rant, but it's annoying. I'll probably make a video on the Pope Francis soon, because most people that are criticizing him just don't know anything about Catholic doctrine or what they're talking about.
Well, you could probably just clip that. That was a pretty good blitz of explaining all of that. So yeah, nice work there.
Yeah, thanks. And one more super chat just came through. I think one more. Yeah, from Cringe Walker. Explain this phenomena. A progressive friend disagrees on one thing, they cancel them. A leader agrees on one thing, and they like one struggle. A progressive friend disagrees on one thing, and they cancel them.
Well, that
agrees on one thing, and they act like one struggle. I'm not really sure what he's trying to say.
I mean, I think one way you could view this is, I mean, the first circumstance is just the progressive exercising power, which they love doing, and progressives understand power very well, and they're not really going to attack their own leaders generally over, minor disagreements. They know very well that they won't win that fight. I think there's a lot of pragmatism in the way progressives tend to behave. I'm not exactly, I guess if the one thing was specific, I'm not sure if it's like the same thing, but progressives aren't exactly ideologically consistent in how they act, but they're very practical in how they act, and they can be very vicious. So they might cancel their friend purely for the exercise of power rather than any real ideological reason.
Yeah,
you can elevate that. But if you're the canceller, people might love you for it, and you can increase your own status.
Yeah, it. I mean, I'm still not totally sure what Cringe Walker is trying to say, but I'd say just basically the reason that they would give more leeway to a leader than to just a friend of theirs is because the leader actually does things for them politically, where they can afford to just throw away friends over political disagreements. Where it's like Monica Lewinsky, or not Monica Lewinsky, but when the Monica Lewinsky scandal was happening, I remember there was some actress or someone famous at the time who said, "I would, perform oral sex on Bill Clinton myself as long as he kept abortion legal." And that's the basic sort of mentality. They, if people are, that's obviously a particularly crude form of that, but the basic mentality of if someone's doing good stuff for them, they're more forgiving. But yeah, and sorry, another super chat came through. Freedom Tunes is one of you silly papists. Go watch his Babylon Bee interview and support his animation work. It's kind of entertainment. It's the kind of entertainment you want. I've never really watched much of his stuff, to be honest. I've seen a few things. It's fine, I guess. But yeah, I mean, check out Freedom Tunes, guys. I'll if you gave me $5, I'll try and at least watch one of his videos today or tomorrow or something. As for the money you gave me, maybe I'll enjoy it more. But I don't know. I've never been into the sort of short form animation work in general. But yeah. So does anyone else have anything they want to say?
Well, I was hoping to answer the title of this stream. Yes.
Yes. We never did really talk about the Trump, whether or not Trump could win.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
I think we did, yeah.
A little bit. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. But when I did first plan this stream, I when I did first plan this stream, it was right when Trump got sick, and I was blackpilling a little bit and thinking, that this could really negatively affect it if it really hits him hard. I didn't think that he was actually going to die, but if he was sick for like 2 weeks seriously or something like that, if he was really seriously sick for a while, then then that probably would have negatively affected his campaign quite a bit, and people would say like, oh, look how bad this is, because if he was really sick. But he seemed to have a very rapid recovery, and he seems to be doing fine. So I'm that's looking good. But no, the main sort of thing I was trying to get at with the title of whether or not Trump can still win was the main sort of thing that I was trying to get at with the title of whether or not Trump can still win it is the poll numbers are looking pretty bad, and I know I'm going to get tons of people saying, oh, polls don't matter. The thing is, I watch tons of polls. I'm obsessive with watching polls, not just American polls from all over the Western world. And I can say very confidently, in most countries, in most Western countries, the polls are very close to the actual result. The one example I normally go to, but this is true in most cases, is in the 2017, whenever the last French presidential election was. I was seeing people all over like right-wing social media saying, oh, look, Marie Le Pen, she's going to win so easily. The polls are saying she's down 20%, but she's going to be fine. She's going to win. The polls are, these progressives think the polls matter. Who cares what the polls say? The polls are obviously going to be wrong, just like they were wrong for Trump and Brexit. And then the polls end up actually over predicting how many votes Marie Le Pen would get, over predicting by only a little bit, but still the polls were almost right on. If they're wrong at all, they were too generous to her. And that's just one example. That there's been similar examples in Sweden, in the UK for the last election, where the Conservatives did win. Not that means much because the Conservative Party in the UK sucks. But the polls, the poll numbers before the election were showing basically what the Conservatives got. They were very accurate. Now, I'm not saying that means that the polls are going to be right dead on in the United States. And the polls have been narrowing in swing states, and that's good because the national tally in the U.S. doesn't matter. All that matters is the tally in the swing states. But I really don't want people, especially if you do actually want Trump to win, to get this feeling that like, oh, it's over, we're going to win easily. Like I saw someone in the chat earlier in the stream say something like, oh, Trump easily won in 2016, and the poll said he was going to lose. No, he didn't easily win. He won by like about 100 and what was it, like maybe 150,000, maybe only even 50,000 votes in like 3 states. If he would have lost all 3 of the Rust Belt states, he would have lost the election. And he managed to win all 3. That's really impressive, and it is. But it was only like whatever, like 100,000 votes that he won by in an election where both sides got about 60 million votes. So like winning by the margin of like 100,000 votes in a 60 million vote election is insanely narrow. It's one of the most narrow elections ever, really. I mean, there have been more narrow ones like Bush v. Gore and stuff. But it was a very narrow victory. And Trump easily could have lost in 2016. And he easily could still lose again. So I really hate the sort of I really hate the sort of triumphalism that a lot of people have. And it's unwarranted and it's unhelpful.
Well said.
Another super chat came through. Let me clarify: the clergy needs to stop doing inappropriate things to kids and turn those who do over to secular authorities for trial. I mean, like I said, the church can and should always do more to fight corruption. And I'm not saying that there hasn't been any serious problems with that particular sorts of issues. In the church, I want to use the specific words because of the auto censors and stuff. I'm sure the audience understands, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I mean, this is one of many things that is massively overblown. Again, I'm not saying that there aren't serious issues with it. I'm not saying that that the abuse that has happened in the church doesn't matter. I'm not saying that it hasn't existed. Yes, it has existed. Yes, there's problems with it. Yes, the church always does need to do more, and the church does need to do more now. But for one, the church has done a lot, and for two, there's been many studies on this that have shown that the problem with the church with abuse is no more significant than most other similar religious institutions. I mean, one statistic in particular I got from one of these studies, which is quite interesting, is that most of the abuse comes from volunteers, not from priests, and the memes are always about like abusive priests. But even beyond that, there are very similar rates of abuse in most Protestant churches and other churches, and for that matter, in the Orthodox Church too. I've several times had EOs very triumphantly tell me that that type of stuff doesn't happen in our church. That's just a Catholic thing. Now I know most EOs that you meet online are like converts who have been EO for like 2 months. But the country of Serbia has been going through a massive sex abuse crisis for like years now. It happens in your church too. One of the top bishops in Canada and America is in prison for that type of stuff. And again, I'm not saying that the EO church is particularly bad with this. I'm just saying that it's really stupid to pretend that you don't have problems with this either. And I've never seen any particularly compelling evidence that it's any worse in the Catholic Church than it is in other churches. And again, I know I'm going to get people that are going to hear that and say that I'm downplaying it and stuff and say that, oh, he's saying that the abuse that happens doesn't matter. I'm not saying any of that. The abuse that happens does matter, and the church should not. The church that Christ personally established should not accept average. All I'm saying is that you'd never get this question to a Baptist would never get this question. No one would ever say, "Oh, your church really needs to do this." And this always goes in one direction because there's been a specific coordinated defamation of the church.
I love when Seller goes on a based Catholic screed. I mean, something tells me with these super chats, the new IKB has been giving. Something tells me this is not really about the Catholic Church, or whatever. It is, of course, in a certain sense, but him talking about, well, I'm really focused on every single problem with corruption and everything problem with abuse, and you should just set up your own anti-pope and all that stuff. Man, do you have a good relationship with your father? Do you have an urge to rebel against him? Just come back, return. You need to return to the patriarchy. Just accept his authority.
And I'm sorry, I shouldn't continue. Okay, I should not read the chat. But someone just said this rarely happens in Baptist church. Bleep are in Caths. I just told you that's not true. Do I need to bring out the studies? I have read the studies on this. I have one in particular that specifically says it's worse in Protestant churches in America than Catholic churches per capita. I'm not going to go through the studies right now live on stream. I already fumble with my words enough, but I might have to make a video on this. I'll at least post the studies below afterwards so you guys can look through them or the names of the studies or whatever. But yes, it's very bad in Protestant churches, or it's bad. I don't want to say it's very bad. It is bad to a similar degree in Protestant churches. So yes, that's why I bring it up, because there is lots of evidence to show that it's just as bad in Protestant churches, if not in some cases worse. I'm not saying that Protestant churches are super bad. Again, all I'm saying is there's some evidence that says it's worse, at least in America in Protestant churches. I'm not saying that all the evidence says that. I'm just saying there's some. And overall, the evidence says that it's not that different between most churches in America, at least. And another comment that I saw in chat, and I know I shouldn't interact with this stuff, but why can no one agree whether or not Vatican II is heretical? This is, again, really stupid internet theology stuff. Every single Catholic believes that Vatican II is not heretical. If you believe Vatican II is heretical, you are not a Catholic, because you cannot disagree with the infallible parts of you cannot disagree with the infallible parts of a ecumenical council and be a Catholic. You cannot reject an ecumenical council. All 21 of them, from Nicaea to Vatican II, must be accepted. Now, there are parts of ecumenical councils which are not infallible and that do not need to be assented to in certain ways. It doesn't really mean anything to say liturgy is infallible. You do need to. When a ecumenical council establishes norms for liturgy, that's what is to be followed for until new liturgy is established. But I don't really know what it means to say that the liturgy is infallible. The liturgy is a style of doing things. But again, I understand. Like, I've been on Catholic Twitter, I've been on all this stuff, I've been on these Discord servers. If you were in these circles, you would get the impression that like half of Catholics or half of church-going Catholics are SSPX or something like that, or they're like super anti-Vatican II. They attend a Latin mass. They think the Pope might be an anti-Pope. The reality is the SSPX, or the SSPX is not Sedevacantist. They don't think the Pope is an anti-Pope. But they're one of the big hardline traditionalist quote unquote organizations. They have about 100,000 people that attend their masses. In a church of over 1 billion people, 100,000. It's incredibly small. And then there's the FSSP, which is fully loyal to the Pope, and they're not canonically irregular like the SSPX. But even if you were to say every single FSSP member is just this hardline based anti-Vatican II Catholic, there aren't that many people that attend FSSP parishes either. I think there's something like 200 FSSP priests in the entire world. I can't remember. I'd have to, let me check the Wikipedia quickly. There are 482 FSSP priests, and there's something like 50,000 Catholic priests in the world. So like these sort of internet trad communities are incredibly small, and the idea that the idea that that like this trad stuff is like the sort of like anti-Vatican II stuff is at all significant within the Catholic Church it's just these are tiny internet subcultures that they have barely any relevance. But yeah, so I don't know. I shouldn't rant too much more about this. Does anyone else have anything I want to say?
Well, you do see this type of thing a lot, and I won't pretend to not fall for it myself sometimes, but I think it's just one of those don't punch right things. And I mean, do you really want to be weakening the Catholic Church right now? I mean, that's probably not the best use of your political energy. So basically all of the signaling against Catholicism I see seems to come from righties. And just why do that? I mean, just go punch lefties instead, right? I mean, why, we see...
Metaphorically, of course.
Yeah, metaphorically.
In Minecraft.
But we have this thing, don't punch right, and it seems like that don't punch right applies to people beyond just our space that we actually interact in, right? It applies to massive institutions as well, and the Catholic Church is one of those. And there's really no reason to attack it from the right. That just doesn't really make sense to me. So I would just say don't participate in any of that, and maybe it will go away.
Clearly, we have a problem with aside from the indifferent gamers that are gonna complain about esoteric topics on the internet. Clearly, we have a problem with pretty low conviction, indifferent people that are willing to punch right. So if you're a righty that's willing to punch right, then you must not be very concerned about the normalization of pedophilia. You must be not concerned about your country literally disintegrating. You must not really care about this stuff, and you must, either that or your brain doesn't have enough convolutions in it, enough gray matter to understand the stakes of what's to come in the near future.
Yeah, and I got another super chat, and I don't know. I mean, I was considering not even reading this out. But Brian for $5. What's your favorite part from Francis? Bishops bowing to Pachamama, or the Pope allowing divorced and remarried people to communion? Again, like I really should not even like allow this calumny on my channel. But I'll respond to this just anyways. For one, the Pachamama quote unquote statue was a Mary statue. Was it an ugly Mary statue? Yes. Was it a Mary statue that could be scandalous? And I know it's going to be Protestants are going to throw at me for the rest of my life saying, "Oh, doesn't this look like a pagan statue?" Yes, yes, it was scandalous. I don't think it was a very great statue. I wish I wish that they did not use that statue. With that said, do you know anything about church history? Do you not know that when Constantine came to power, he literally was constantly taking over pagan statues and making them Catholic statues? Like, this happened all the time. So even if it's true that the Pachamama statue is based on is based on the statue, and again, I'm using your language. It's not a Pachamama statue. It's what did they say at the ceremony where they had the statue? Did they call it a Pachamama statue? No, they called it Our Lady of the Amazon because that's what it is. It's an ugly statue of Mary. That's why they called it Our Lady of the Amazon and not Pachamama. The people that were calling it the Pachamama statue were the Taylor Marshall crew. That and by the way, many people may know that about some person like stole the statue and threw it into the river, and Taylor Marshall acted as though like, oh, cool, based development, some based Catholic rose up and threw the statue into the river. Taylor Marshall paid for that person to do that. The whole thing was a setup by him. But again, there's nothing wrong with having a statue of something good where some artistic element of it is based on something that's bad. I mean, there's far more extreme versions of that happened. As I said, Saint Constantine. I don't know if he's canonized or not. I've gotten mixed answers on that. Emperor Constantine, when he converted the Roman Empire, when he started converting the Roman Empire to Catholicism, would literally take over pagan temples and say these are churches now, or even pagan statues and say this is a statue of the Archangel Michael or whatever now. So again, am I not? I do think that the Our Lady of the Amazon statue was not very useful. I wish it was. I wish the Pope did not call it a Pachamama statue. One of the Pope's advisors called it a Pachamama statue because literally everyone in the media was calling it a Pachamama statue after the organized smear campaign. And just as you saw me here, when you called it Pachamama statue, I called it Pachamama statue because that's what you're calling it. So when everyone calls it a Pachamama statue, I start using that term. Just like this is the point I always make with don't use the left's language. Don't use your enemy's language because it controls how you think. So when you have people constantly saying, "Oh, that's Pachamama, that's Pachamama, that's Pachamama," you're going to start using the language, and you shouldn't. I know because you're bowing down to their framework when you start using that, but it's not what it is. It was an ugly Mary statue. And if it was not heretical for the earliest Christians to take over pagan statues and say these are Christian statues now, then it's not heretical for people to do that today. Can it be scandalous? Yeah, it can be, and I don't think that should be done. And communion and divorce. I know that you don't understand Amoris Laetitia. So I'm not going to give you any more time on this. You've gotten enough of a rant for your $5. But I'm confident that you do not understand the natives. No, I really should not read chat. The natives the natives said it was a Pachamama statue. I know who you're referring to. You're referring to an evangelical Protestant who is a native. I mean, yes, he is a native. But there was an evangelical Protestant who was toted around in the by some of the anti-Francis Catholics. Who said it? Oh, this is a pagan statue. He's an evangelical. He thinks everything the church does is pagan. He believes all Mary statues are pagan. Like what do you expect? And like this calumny. I really if people keep on coming up with these stupid criticisms that I see again and again and again, I'm just not going to allow it on my channel. I know. It's really annoying to deal with this constantly. But yeah, I don't know. That's been quite the rant. But thanks guys for joining us. Does anyone have anything they want to say for their closing statements?
Yeah, chat should just keep posting counter signaling, and Settler will never stop. Apparently.
Charlemagne, is this what you were talking about when you were saying getting multiplying exponential returns on your investment?
Yeah, basically, chat has demonstrated the point very well. They have invested their super chats into triggering Settler's Lament way beyond their initial investment. Anyway, no, it was a good stream. I think I talked a lot this stream, so hopefully I didn't monopolize the time too much. But yeah, it was fun.
Make sure everyone to subscribe to everyone that was here. And